Ooh, but then you might give away your secret identity.
Yeah. My secret communist spy identity.
Okay, well, who's going?
Okay, so hi everyone. This is With Chinese Characteristics, saying hello to you again. I'm Cherry.
I'm Natalie.
This is a podcast where a Chinese and an American talk about topics with Chinese characteristics. And Natalie's laughing because this is my first time doing the intro.
It's like you have a class presentation and clearly somebody just did not prepare for it. They're like, my report is on penguins.
I wrote it just like last night at 2 a.m.
Yeah. So this is a podcast about Chinese things. And I have a Chinese topic, even though I'm American. By the way, anybody who listens to this podcast, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
We do.
Not that many people listen to it, so every time the download counter
don't say that.
goes up by 1.
They don't know that.
They don't know that? Lots of people listen. But even still, we appreciate it every time the little download counter goes up by 1. Mm-hmm. Our topic today is about the Republic of China. So Taiwan.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
What we now would call Taiwan, right? But
yeah.
The Republic of China. So
still on the passport.
So
I'm obligated to say that.
Yeah.
From the People's Republic of China.
From the People's Republic of China. So it's 1945.
Okay. Second
World War is over. Japan is defeated. To the victors go the spoils. So congratulations, Chiang Kai Shek and the Republic of China. Yeah. You are technically on the winning side.
Yes.
One of those victors is you and your nationalist government. The war left the nationalists with a lot of things.
Yeah.
One of which was basically one of the largest, if not the largest, navies in Asia. Because there weren't very many navies left in Asia, right? If you count out the British and the American Navy, there's not really too many others.
I didn't even know we had a large Navy force.
All right. Oh, your mind is about to be blown, Cherry. Okay, this whole thing. The Americans and the British left the Republic of China ships that were no longer needed, like landing craft, transports, and patrol vessels. Also, large portions of the captured Japanese Navy were transferred to the Republic of China.
Oh, good time.
So like a third.
That's what we should do to all failed countries that failed that lost the war.
Anyone who has angered China.
Yeah.
So basically, quite a large number of captured Japanese ships, and also British and Americans. Obviously, they were demobilizing. Mm-hmm. So it's like, what are we going to do with these ships? Well, we'll just leave them here. China wants them, right?
Yeah.
So then the world had 5 years of relative peace outside of the civil war raging within China.
Yeah. I was going to say, you don't know what's coming in China. Yeah. As soon as
ended.
Soon as we won the war against the Japanese.
So civil war in China, basically before Japan invaded, Chiang Kai Shek's like, I got to kill this Mao guy. Mm-hmm. And then
he chased the communists all around the country.
All around the country for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Then Japan invaded and he got distracted. And you know what? He was right, because as soon as the war ended, the communists came back and took over the country. So 1949, the Communist Party under Mao Tse Tung succeeded in their conquest of China, or liberation, as you might put it.
That's the party line.
Yeah, it is the People's Liberation Army. And Chiang Kai Shek's nationalist government retreated to the island of Taiwan, which he was able to do because he had a very large navy.
Okay, that makes sense now.
So, even though Chiang Kai Shek and his nationalists had fled to the island of Taiwan, the war over China never stopped. The KMT, who is the political party of the Nationalists, immediately began fortifying the islands offshore of China, launching guerrilla raids and blocking all merchant traffic it could to mainland Chinese ports.
Okay.
This embargo was weak at first, but rapidly strengthened due to the support of the United States Navy.
Of course.
So, it's like 1950, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, the U.S. Navy was there for several reasons. First, to train and equip the Republic of China Navy to protect the island of Taiwan. Second, to prevent either side from invading across the strait. So Taiwan is an island. It's maybe 100-something kilometers off the coast of China.
Yeah.
And it was considered equally likely that Chiang Kai Shek would go back across to mainland China.
And succeed?
Well, that he would spark something, right?
Okay. He could start a war.
He would start a war.
Point. Okay.
And since we were his ally, and in 1949, the Soviet Union had signed a defense pact with China and Mao,
Yeah.
it was considered that if they got in another war, then both sides could get their friends involved, and then we'd have a nuclear war.
A World War III.
A World War III. So it's considered we got to just keep these two people apart. Okay, so yeah, it was considered quite possible that a continuation of the Chinese Civil War could involve the United States. So the goal...
What Civil War doesn't it include
the United States
in recent years? I guess back then it was just starting.
Yeah, we didn't really quite have
global
world police.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to put it too negatively because obviously in this case it helped.
Well, just wait, Cherry.
Okay.
Wait, you're maybe gonna change your tune, right?
Try me.
This goal of modernizing and training the Republic of China Navy had the side effect of strengthening the effect of the nationalist blockade.
Yeah.
Despite their goal of preventing conflict, the U.S. Navy did little to prevent smaller-scale nationalist activities. Guerrillas continued to raid across the strait, based in islands directly off the Chinese coast.
Okay.
This continued to antagonize the People's Republic of China. So Mao. These islands, most of them are very close to China. Like if you look at some of them, you can see the shore, right?
Yeah.
So they're right off the coast. So the U.S. Navy turned a blind eye to most of the nationalist efforts and also collaborated in the blockade.
Okay.
It trained Republic of China troops in the United States, such as at the Naval Academy in Annapolis and MIT.
Oh.
As well as making it illegal for U.S. registered vessels to trade with the People's Republic of China.
Yeah.
So when I say they assisted, they wouldn't actively, stop ships. But it seems clear they would sometimes tell the nationalists where the ships were. Okay. So that they could stop them.
They're on their side, basically. Yeah.
So both the United States and the United Kingdom supported this at first as a quote-unquote stew in their own juices strategy.
Wait, stewing their own juices?
Yes, because it was considered that theoretically Beijing would grow dissatisfied with the economic aid provided by the Soviet Union, and come back with a political solution in order to gain American aid and trade, because the United States wanted the People's Republic of China to not be part of the Moscow Soviet axis. Yeah, and they also wanted a political agreement to end the kind of standoff between the nationalists and the communists.
Right. So they don't want war, but also they don't want China, this giant country, to be part of the map that's red. Yes, basically. Right? Yeah.
And they especially don't want it to be communist and an ally of Moscow.
Yeah.
Eventually, though, the blockade became weaker, especially because the PRC began to retake coastal islands that were further away from Taiwan. Yeah. So up north near like Korea and stuff, they started retaking those islands. Mm-hmm. By 1950, the blockade really only reached as far north as Shanghai. Okay. Given the reality of the situation, the United Kingdom recognized China diplomatically in 1950. What?
That's quick.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
And they did it because of... What are you doing? Just cough.
Just burping.
Oh. so
I'm trying to be quiet about it.
Yeah, so I was surprised about that too. And basically it's because Hong Kong's right there. So they thought, if we don't diplomatically recognize the PRC, they're going to invade Hong Kong. Yeah. And we don't really think we can stop them. So
not then, not now.
Yeah, not then, right now.
Yeah.
So they're like, you know what? We have to recognize them, right?
Right.
We don't really have a choice. Yeah. And most other countries in the region that were not like U.S. allies did so as well. So India recognized them. So 1949 was all of the Soviet places basically, which is obviously right. So all like
part of a big happy family.
A big happy family. But some standouts in 1950. You had Sweden, you had the United Kingdom, you had India, Vietnam, Switzerland, Indonesia, Pakistan. So a lot of the nations in the area, right? Yeah. All just recognized the new China. Yeah. The UK at this point sort of split from the US, and that they weren't going to actively oppose what the US was doing, but they thought if we cut off trade to the People's Republic of China, they'll only have the Soviet Union to trade with, so they'll become closer. But if we don't cut off trade, they'll gradually become closer to us.
Also, you keep getting rich on Hong Kong.
Yeah, and you keep getting rich on Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. They kept trading to Hong Kong. Right. And Hong Kong would trade with the mainland. Okay. So now that's the situation, right? The United States is holding out, not recognizing them. Other places haven't either, but a lot of those places, it doesn't really matter if they recognize them or not. Okay, so the Korean War started in 1950.
Yeah.
And that kind of put a stop in things because it was thought in 1950 that it was maybe possible for the People's Liberation Army to retake the islands. They had lots of troops there. They were kind of ready to go, but then the Korean War started. So the Korean War is basically the United States was doing bad at decolonializing places, decolonization.
Yeah.
And in Korea, we took it over from Japan, and we put a lot of the same people back in charge who had been in charge under the Japanese, and they didn't like it. So Kim Il-sung was the North Korean communist guy, and he went to Moscow to ask for permission. And then Stalin was there, and Stalin's like, well, why don't you ask Mao? He's here too.
Yeah.
And Mao was also in Moscow. So he's like, went down.
Was it a coincidence?
It was a coincidence, apparently. So he just went down, and Mao's like, Mao's like, I'll back you up. So they decided to start the war.
Okay.
And Stalin agreed to support the endeavor materially.
All right.
So Korean War happened. It was a big thing. It could be its own topic. One of our episodes, which is our For Pest campaign, talks about a little bit of it. But the war is from 1950 to 1953.
Yeah.
And in it, China, or the new China, fights the United States, Great Britain, Turkey, basically most of the world. And it ends in a stalemate.
Yeah. During
the Korean War, the PRC's attempts to take back islands slowed down due to the needs of the Korean War because they couldn't spare the troops. However, Chiang Kai Shek and his nationalists had no such issues, and they even offered to send troops to Korea to help, which the United States was like, no.
You deal with that.
Yeah, because that would have been a big escalation, right?
Yeah.
As the war progressed, though, the United States began to look at Chiang Kai Shek's nationalists as a possible policy aid. So the
policy aid, as in,
if they pressure China, then that will make it so China can't pressure us as much. If they have to worry about Chiang Kai Shek invading back across the ocean,
okay, it's a distraction.
It's a distraction.
Gotcha.
Right. So, and the United States considered joining officially the Taiwanese Republic of China Navy in 1951 with a full blockade, so United States ships would block all Chinese ports.
Considered?
Yes, considered. But relented because it would have antagonized both the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Because basically they're like, well, there's no point if we don't blockade Hong Kong and Macau.
Yeah.
And if we do that, it's going to make...
That's where all the trade happens?
Yeah, it's going to make the United Kingdom very angry. They might pull out of the war in Korea. So we can't do it. But what the United States did do is essentially start sanctions, where they basically said no country is allowed to sell any war materials to China. But that included things like fuel and rubber and steel. So it basically...
Is that why we had to start?
Wait.
The Great Leap Forward?
No, wait, Sherry. Okay.
Is it America's
No,
fault?
this is
okay.
You just wait.
I'll
okay?
wait.
So there's blocked steel, fuel, rubber, all sorts of things. Okay. And the whole kind of United Nations got on board. So you could still give them like medicine and stuff, big things, but it was basically like the same sort of sanctions we'd put on like Iran today.
This is why China and Iran are good friends today.
Exactly.
You
both felt U.S. sanctions.
Yeah.
So this began to have serious effects on the Chinese economy. Also near the end of the war, 1953-ish, because the war ended in like mid-1953, so this is early 1953.
Yeah.
The United States began flirting more openly with their support of the Nationalists. So the United States never officially kind of said like the Nationalists should be in control of China.
Yeah.
They still considered them the real China, but they're not like allies or anything, right?
No.
So they basically told Chiang Kai Shek they wouldn't stop him from reinvading the mainland if he wanted to.
But they're not helping? Or they are?
Well, it's kind of vague. And the Nationalists did step up their blockades, did raids and things.
Yeah.
And by the end of 1953, the Nationalists had 100,000 troops off the Chinese coast.
Okay, that's a lot.
So that was a serious threat at that point, right?
Yeah.
However, international annoyance was also growing. In many areas, the Nationalists relied on guerrillas, quote unquote, to enforce the blockade. And they're basically like pirates.
Okay.
And while these guerrillas were often trained by U.S. Special Forces, in effect, their tactics were very similar to like Somalian pirates of today.
Okay.
They were on all these islands. They'd come out on little boats. They would take over the ship, and they would ransom the crew. They would steal your cargo.
So not a very upstanding sort of method. No.
And when you hear about like commando raids across from the Nationalists, you know, it sounds like it's like this elite operation, but it almost is kind of just like what the Vikings would do, right? Like I don't, because a lot of these people, like technically they're nationalists, but like they're not really part of any organization.
So they would just they would take whoever they could.
Yeah, and Chiang Kai Shek didn't care, because if it didn't really matter if pirates sunk a ship or he sunk a ship, it still didn't get to China, right? So based on small islands off the Chinese coast, they would prey on merchant shipping. They would seize cargo, hold crews for ransom, and sometimes sink vessels. As the United Kingdom put it, in 1948, it was respectable for bandits to masquerade as communist liberation forces, right?
Okay.
Which is true.
Yeah, it's right? True, yeah.
In 1952...
It's rooted from the people.
I know, right?
It came from the people. It's fighting for the people. So anyone can just claim they're a comrade.
Exactly.
And then fight for it.
And again, Mao didn't care, right? As long as you weren't taking things from other communists, he didn't necessarily care if you were a bandit, as long as you were fighting the nationalists, right?
Yes. Also on the concept of communism, you wouldn't be taking things from communists.
You'd be liberate. Oh yeah, that's true.
You would just be contributing them to the shared pile of things that all communists share. Anyways, but I get
So in 1952, it is respectable for pirates to masquerade as the Nationalist Navy. They go, we're nationalists.
How the things have changed.
And there was a little story, which was like at one point, there was a ship going to Taiwan with like weapons or something, and it got boarded by one of these groups.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, we're going to Taiwan. And they're like, yeah, right. And the pirates like took their stuff, and then Chiang Kai Shek sent a destroyer there and killed them all.
Killed the pirates who took the weapons?
Yeah, who took them. That's because he funny. Was like, you can't steal from me.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, he killed them all?
Yeah, he killed them, right? 1953, the Korean War ended, partially due to, this probably didn't hurt, right? The fact that the Nationalists, we still essentially had a blockade over the entire southern half of China.
Yeah.
Over time, the blockade became stronger as they were equipped with more advanced U.S. weapons, such as jet aircraft. In 1954 alone, British Nationalist aircraft attacked over 34 British ships. And these are just the British ships.
That just were regular trade ships? Okay.
Viewed as breaking the blockade.
Okay. Now, so UK must not be happy about it.
They were extremely not happy about this. And the interesting thing is like they would actually attack the ships. So I don't know what the casualties were like early on.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure people died. This is a kind of a statement from a British merchant captain. He said, "I can handle any 2 nationalist warships. I don't mind their guns or their old planes. But I hate these jets. They come screaming out of nowhere, blast you, and then they're gone. You don't stand a chance."
These American jets.
But they were piloted by
nationalists.
By Republic of China pilots.
Okay.
So they would just, if they thought you were heading to Hong Kong and you might have something, they would just strafe you, I guess, right?
Okay.
And the idea is, I guess, even if they don't sink you, it kind of discourages you from doing it. So this began to put more and more traffic, more and more pressure on Chinese infrastructure.
Okay.
Because now all these things that used to be done by boats now have to be done by the railways. Because before you might have, you might take coal down the river to Shanghai, and then you might bring it up towards near Beijing along the coast. But if you did that now, the Nationalists would sink you. So you can't have any traffic going along your coast, and you can't even fish basically because they would sink your fishing boats. So it put extreme pressure on the Chinese railway system, which was not very well developed.
No, not at that time.
Not at that time. Yeah. And by the late 1950s, over half of China's trade was only with the Soviet Union. This lopsided trade imbalance caused China to rack up huge debts because they didn't have anyone else to trade with. So 1954 is the first Taiwan Strait crisis. 1953, again, the Korean War had ended, and a huge PRC, Communist China, foreign policy goal was breaking the Republic of China blockade and opening up trade. Not to mention the fishing and the shipping between coastal ports.
Right.
On August 11th, 1954, Zhou Enlai, the premier of China, Mao's second-hand guy, declared that the People's Republic of China must liberate Taiwan. Artillery attacks against the closest nationalist islands began soon after. 2 U.S. military advisors were killed and nationalist troops.
Yeah.
As the PRC began to retake more islands, a furious debate began to rage in Washington because it's like, okay, well, what do we do?
Do we help them? Do we not help them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do we jump into World War III?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Especially because we just got out of the Korean War, right?
Mm-hmm. Wasn't there just a theory that when America had dumped the nuclear bombs in Japan, it obviously had ended the war. As a consequence, China had won, right? But to Chiang Kai Shek and his Nationalist party, it was sort of a blow in a way, because if America did come, then they would, of course, aid Chiang Kai Shek in his pursuit against communism on the ground. Or that's the expectation, that what they would do anyways.
I think it could be more considered a loss because while the war was going on, the United States is basically writing a blank check to people like Chiang Kai Shek.
Yeah.
Like whatever you got to do to stay in the fight.
Yeah.
Because if they had surrendered, that suddenly frees up like 2 or 3 million Japanese troops.
Yeah.
To go other places.
Yeah.
So as soon as the war is going, I mean, they're sending food, they're sending supplies, they're sending weapons, and once the war is over, I mean, they're giving them some of the stuff that they don't need anymore. But once the war is over, that kind of ends.
Yeah.
Right? And suddenly all the weapons and the loans and all that are all shut off. It all
stops, yeah. Chiang Kai-shek is left out in the cold.
Exactly.
Fighting the communists by himself.
And it kind of started up again after the war. Yeah. Well, after
war. Had won the Civil War, yeah.
Because it's like, oh, crap. You know what I mean? Like, I really get the impression that the United States didn't really know what to do with Taiwan and the Republic of China. Of like, okay, well, we're not sure what we want to do here. Do we want to support them taking back the mainland? Do we want to? But the thing is, if they get taken out, then you lose a card off the table, right?
It's like playing Twilight Struggle.
Yeah, exactly, right?
It's a very good board game, if anyone.
Yeah, Twilight Struggle is like a Cold War influence game. So I think the United States is like, okay, well, we're not sure what we want to do here. And obviously it can change from administration to administration. But if we lose Taiwan, we can't do anything. So we at least need to make sure it's not taken. So you don't want to start
World War III, but you also want Taiwan to be there.
Yes.
Therefore, a distraction, B, a force that mainland China just can't really ignore.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And also right now they're keeping up a blockade, which is very, very annoying to the People's Republic of China.
Yeah.
So the U.S. has to invade if Taiwan is attacked, it was thought. But do all of these little islands everywhere count as Taiwan, right? Can we just say, well, let them take them back and then we'll just guard Taiwan? Because Taiwan's pretty far away.
Yeah.
Taiwan's much easier to protect than an island that's, 1,000 meters off the coast.
Yeah.
So Chiang Kai Shek thought they counted as Taiwan. And he wasn't about to give them up.
Of course he thought. Yeah. He thought it. He thought that he didn't think it counted as Taiwan. That counted as China. If you asked Chiang Kai Shek to change the Republic of China to Taiwan, he would.
He would shoot you.
He would shoot you. Yeah, he would not be happy with that.
Yeah, he'd be like, "How dare you give up?" So the PRC started to become bolder.
This is after the Korean War.
They had the time and the energy.
The energy again, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also the blockade is becoming more and more of an issue.
Okay. So can we blame?
Oh,
I might be jumping.
Okay. Just wait.
I just want to blame
someone.
We're
gonna get there, Cherry. We're gonna get there.
Okay. I'll wait.
I already know where you're going. So,
I think our audiences, if you, well, I don't know if you know where I'm going.
We're gonna talk about the Great Leap Forward.
But we'll get there.
We're gonna talk about it.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about the Great Famine. So the People's Republic of China, the Navy, the Plan, PLAN. That is what it's called. Okay. People's Liberation Army Navy.
I know. I've never heard of it that way. Plan, yeah.
Became bolder, striking past U.S. fleets who kind of had to just ignore them.
Okay.
Right? And the Eisenhower administration sort of just decided to let it happen for now. And the...
Bad decision. I'm joking. I don't know if it is.
But the U.S. Navy did assist with evacuating nationalist troops from those islands.
Okay.
So basically, the attacks caused the United States to reevaluate its relationship with the Republic of China.
Did America have a base there or in Taiwan at this point? Was that officially like a military base, or they had to like bring ships from other bases nearby?
I don't think we ever had an actual base there.
Okay.
Because I think to a certain extent, I almost think Chiang Kai Shek didn't want it. Obviously, like Japan didn't have a choice, right?
Well, when you lose the war that you started.
Yeah. So they didn't really have a choice.
Sorry if you're Japanese and I offended you, but
at the time they didn't have a choice, right?
Yeah. Even though today they started building up their navy again,
but
and
Chiang
that makes me a
Kai-shek,
Chinese person very nervous.
Yeah,
but continue.
Right?
Sorry.
Well, when they start making aircraft carriers.
I know.
Do you know that Japan just signed a weapons agreement with Vietnam, and they're going to start providing Vietnam with ships now and weapons?
No, I did not know.
So,
oh gosh, it's closing in.
It's closing in. Okay, so the U.S. is not sure what to do here.
Yeah.
If it did go to war over, the Republic of China, it wouldn't be like the Korean War, because since the United Kingdom had already recognized the People's Republic of China, they viewed Taiwan to be Mao's property, right? Because it's like
United Kingdom.
United Kingdom,
Okay.
Great Britain. Because since they're the real China, then these people
Can
must
I just
be
be bitter
rebels.
for a second?
What's that?
It's like Hong Kong wasn't any part of this one of these two Chinas. It was Hong Kong was the property of England.
Yeah.
Even then, England goes, UK goes, yeah, but Taiwan is one of the
Taiwan's
other
your
China.
property.
It's sort of like
as long as we can keep Hong Kong, you can have Taiwan. Quid pro quo.
Yeah. or political chess with other people's lives, but
Yes.
yeah.
Unwilling to make a firm commitment, the Congress instead passed the Formosa Resolution, which
Formosa, if you could.
Formosa is what Taiwan used to be called.
Yes.
The resolution basically kind of told the U.S. president, whoever they are at the time, it's up to you. So it basically said the U.S. president can decide if an attack on an island counts as an attack on Taiwan. So the U.S. president can kind of decide if an island is necessary for the strategic defense of Taiwan and whether or not the United States needs to get involved. And it also basically says you can kind of do whatever you think you got to do.
Okay.
So in return, though, the United States wanted Chiang Kai Shek to quit it a little bit with all his little guerrilla raids.
Okay.
And also to abandon the islands that are just right off the coast.
Okay.
They're right there.
It's too hard to defend them.
It's too hard to defend them. They can attack them whenever they want.
Yeah.
Each one of those is an opportunity for us to get drawn into a war.
Right.
Chiang Kai Shek basically said, no.
Well,
Chiang Kai Shek's like, no, I'm not going to do that.
not one more inch of land.
Not one more inch, right?
Well, didn't Chiang Kai Shek, maybe you'll get to it, but didn't he have sort of a reputation at this point that he's sort of gung-ho stubbornness
Yeah.
of this attitude of not one more inch of land,
Yeah.
not one more battle, anything we can get, we're going to just go all out and try to get it. Sort of scared the Americans
It did.
or military advisors on the ground.
Well, that's why one of the roles of the fleet was to not let him get back to China. Well, I
Because
think it's,
if they didn't stop him, he would probably just bet everything.
Yeah, and lose it all.
And lose it all
then-
again. Well, I
and
mean,
get
you don't know
killed.
if he's gonna, but he would be willing to bet it.
Yes.
You're saying on an all-out
And the United
attack.
States might have to be convinced to throw in with him in order to keep. Because here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Not to cast shade upon any founders of any countries, but like in the decolonialization of Asia, there are lots of nationalist leaders and there's lots of communist leaders. A lot of times, one of each for each country, and usually the communist leaders are more competent. It just seems that way, right? Vietnam, Korea, China, but
yeah.
I would say Chiang Kai Shek is the best of the bunch.
You think so?
Compared to like Syngman Rhee, who's the guy who founded South Korea,
Okay.
or I even forget
So they really
the list of people who went through Vietnam.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're like, okay, this guy, it's almost like when you have like a kingdom,
Okay.
and it's like you keep a son in your kingdom, right? In case you ever want to make a claim,
Yeah.
right on that. It's like, well, we've got him. He
Yeah.
can say he's the king. If we take it over, we can put it like
he's still legit enough.
he's still legit enough. He has a
Yeah.
legitimate claim to the throne.
Yeah.
He's at least reasonably competent, and he mostly listens to us, right?
But also, because he's competent enough and he has legitimacy
Yes.
of the Republic of China's
Yes.
throne, if he throws himself back in it, he could last long enough that America would be forced to
Do something.
throw yourselves in it too.
Or he'll get killed, and then there goes your
There
heir
goes
to the
that
throne.
part of Asia.
Yeah.
That's
So,
interesting. I didn't know that.
Okay, so basically the Eisenhower administration tried several more times to get him to abandon the islands, and he's like, no. So
Okay.
Admiral Arleigh Burke, who the U.S. Navy's modern guided missile destroyers are named after, said this of the islands to Eisenhower: "They don't mean anything. It's a purely symbolic thing. They don't mean anything except who's daddy, who runs that part of the world, the red Chinese or the nationalist Chinese. But physically, it doesn't make a difference."
Has he met any Chinese person?
It's all symbolic.
Has he not been educated by like Eastern Asian philosophy of like whose daddy's very important?
Yeah, it's all patriarchy, Cherry.
Yeah. No, but I think, I mean, that's true.
Right? I mean, it doesn't. I mean, the islands are not very large either, but you know, it's all optics. But
Yeah.
it does to an extent because they did run the blockade from them. But I mean, they could still run the blockade from Taiwan if they needed
Well, I
to.
mean, maybe in Chiang Kai Shek's eyes, symbolism is everything at this point for him, because he takes a very small corner of what China is.
Yes.
And he wants to claim himself still as legit China. So of course, symbolism is all you have,
It's
right?
all symbolism, right?
You have to pretend that you have it until you
Get
hopefully have it again
Right?
one day.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's like, I mean,
So I
Mao,
get that a
Mao
little
had
bit.
nothing when he started either, right?
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
If Mao can do it, why can't I do it? So that's the end of the first Taiwan Strait crisis. And it
Okay.
basically ends with the United States passed the Formosa Resolution. In the end, it was a strategic loss on Beijing, People's Republic of China's part,
Okay.
because while they did get a couple islands, the KMT, the Republic of China, kept enough to still keep up a blockade.
Right.
The U.S. became more close with them, and the Soviet government kind of backed off its support. They're like, we don't want to get in a war with the United States, so we're not really going to support you in this. So basically,
So much for the support from the big brother.
exactly, right? The U.S. also had to be careful of giving the Nationalists too much support, though, lest they use it to conduct operations on the mainland. No, it's kind of sad almost, but we should do an episode on how when Chiang Kai Shek got older, he got more and more desperate to take back China.
Oh yeah, I've read about that, and I was like,
And he
this
got
is
all these
crazy.
people killed, like doing all these exercises of like.
Yeah.
But anyway, so 1958.
Okay.
So we're now 4 years later. The second Taiwan Strait crisis. By the late 1950s, the blockade on the People's Republic of China, alongside the U.S.-led strategic resource embargo, had more and more serious issues, or had incurred more and more serious issues on the Chinese economy.
Okay.
Some scholars believe that some of Mao's more dramatic moves were precipitated by the dire economic conditions caused by the blockade. Large amounts of money were owed to the USSR,
Okay.
who had charged the People's Republic of China for all military equipment it provided during the Korean War.
I'm shaking my head.
Right? So the Great Leap Forward, which is Mao's grand vision, the Great Leap Forward's drive towards all areas of the nation being independently economically sufficient may have been partially due to the inability of the Chinese rail transport network to make up for the loss of coastal ship traffic and the increasingly dire trade surplus with the Soviet Union. Also, the high volume of grain exports that ended up causing famines in China were meant to pay back the Soviet debt.
Yeah. So I think that's actually part of history. I think more people should sort of understand or get to know, like, where did the grains go? Because China still did. I mean, yeah, the communes and all that stuff wasn't very efficient, right?
Yes.
But still, the export of these large amount of food to Soviet Union really has played a huge. If they didn't do that, it would have been a much better situation.
Yeah.
It may not have even have a famine. So it's sort of a.
Yeah. So basically, I think so Great Leap Forward, there's a couple ways you can look at it. So obviously, they did a lot of very bad stuff that didn't work. The collectivization didn't really work. His kind of grain planting, his rice planting techniques that Mao had didn't work.
To kill all the birds also
Kill
didn't
all
work.
the birds didn't work.
Yeah.
But in the end, I mean, not everybody in the entire country did those things.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the reasons there was such a huge famine was that basically...
You gave them all away?
Yeah, so basically...
Paid the
Mao was like, this is a huge oversimplification, but basically the Great Leap Forward, there's all this stuff with steel and other stuff, but the farming part of it was Mao was like, all right, we got to make like twice as much rice as normal because we got to pay back these Soviet debts because we owe them huge amounts of money by Chinese perspective.
Yeah.
Because we don't have anyone else to trade with, right? So if they cut off our trade, we're screwed.
Yeah.
He's like, we need to grow like, let's say, twice as much rice. So then they're like, and we'll give half to the Soviets. So then they basically grew less rice than normal, and they still gave half of it to the Soviets to pay off the debt, which they did do eventually, but it caused huge famines. From that perspective, one could view some of these things as an extension of Chiang Kai Shek's blockade of the Chinese coast and the United States' led strategic embargo for things like steel and oil.
Well, as much as I would like to blame everything, big or small, on the Chinese Communist government.
I thought you were going to say United States.
Sometimes.
Oh, okay.
But, for things what happened 50 years ago in China, which is, what we've been talking about for a few episodes at this point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if it's to blame, because it's not, you can blame collectivism, right? You can blame a very, inefficient, poorly planned economy.
Yeah.
But then also the allies you chose, or at this point are forced to choose, which is Soviet Union, that had sort of, brought China into the Korean War, right?
Yeah.
But then said, okay, we'll give you the weapons and all that stuff, but not for free, which you might have to pay back later.
Yeah, and Mao, Mao was very unhappy with Stalin for the Korean War because he felt like they did all the work. Because Stalin greenlit Kim Il-sung.
So it's all Stalin's fault, basically.
Kind of, because Stalin greenlit Kim Il-sung to invade South Korea.
Yeah.
And Mao was like, okay, sure. But in the end, the United States would have never been there if North Korea hadn't invaded. And so China would have never gotten involved in the war.
So China was brought into it.
Basically, yeah. Right? Yeah,
or a volunteer army. Volunteer to do it. By Stalin, basically.
So I think it's interesting, though, because this whole situation, right? Mm-hmm. And you probably, maybe you have, but had you ever heard of the Nationalist blockade of southern coastal China?
I have not, no.
And I kind of wonder about it, because it's like, okay, well, why don't they talk about this, right? Why isn't this a part of more of like the...
it would seem to be a narrative that the CCP today could push for.
Right, because it's like, oh, aren't these people all bad, right?
Yeah.
But I think it makes them look weak. And I think the reason they don't talk about it is because I think 1950 onwards, supposed to be century of shame is over. China is no longer...
Here we go again.
Right? Yeah. China is no longer the whim of all these historical forces. Now China is the historical force again. We tell other people what to do. Yeah. So the idea...
So we glorify the Korean War. We glorify... we went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And all this stuff. Yeah.
But to...
Wait, did we go to Vietnam during those years?
No,
that's
but you
much
did
later.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
But the idea that Chiang Kai Shek on his island is somehow destroying the Chinese economy.
Yeah.
From there,
it's just unimaginable.
It kind of makes it look weak, or that the Chinese people were kind of roped into the Korean War by Stalin.
Oh no, we don't know if we were roped into it.
Yeah.
We again the name of the army.
Yeah.
Gives a narrative that we must help our communist brother state.
Yes.
And we want to be there.
Exactly, right?
Also, Mao lost his son.
Yeah.
Right.
And then cooking fried rice. But so it is interesting, right? And I kind of have, and it could be that really it didn't have that much of effect, the blockade, and it was mostly just it was.
Yeah. Also, if you've been pushing this narrative that Soviet Union is your big brother, and then you realize, okay, it's just another sort of quid pro quo. Also, all these ideas seem to have benefited the Soviet Union much more.
Oh yeah.
Than Mao and Communist China.
Yes.
But you can't really go back to trashing them, right? You have to keep up the narrative.
Exactly, right?
So like people have faith in communism.
Well, let me get back to it. So, other nations such as the United Kingdom tried to take advantage and increase trade with the mainland, which was desperate for trade, which incurred the wrath of the Nationalist blockade. Mm-hmm. Still, the United Kingdom were determined and began escorting their merchant ships with warships in order to run the blockade.
Interesting, okay.
Basically, the United Kingdom's like, well, what if we escort them with warships? And the Nationalist is like, hey, it's your funeral. Like, basically, if we see one without a warship, we're going to shoot it.
Right.
But eventually, the Republic of China Navy partially relented and stopped shooting at British merchant ships, though they would still search them sometimes.
Okay.
But they would shoot at other people's ships, too.
Okay.
So if they saw a Chinese coal ship going along the coast, they would just sink it. Okay, but in 1957, the United Kingdom finally formally said it would no longer abide by the blockade, and we're just going to do normal trade with the People's Republic of China. But it takes two to tango. So the PRC is like, okay, how do we get this UK trade? And they're like, well, we need to take some of these islands that the UK ships are going to sail through so they don't get attacked by pirates.
Okay. But they already took back some of the islands.
Yeah, but they got to take back more.
Okay.
So basically, like, we got to take back everything but Taiwan. So that way...
And America is no longer supporting it officially.
No. But we have the option from the Formosa Resolution.
Okay.
If an island does get attacked, the United States can then decide whether or not it's vital to the strategic import of Taiwan. And the thing is, the problem when you're dealing with the United States, right, as we have an election in 2 days or something, 3 days,
dicey,
is that when you pass a law, right, or a resolution, you don't know who the person in charge is going to be when it actually comes up. It can change very rapidly. It's one of the reasons why the United States preferred dictators during the Cold War, because you can have the same person there for
cruel but stable regime.
You can have the same person there for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right? And you know if you make a deal with them, unless they get overthrown, the same guy's going to be there.
Yeah.
But hey, you make a deal with France, who knows who they're going to have in another couple of years. So
they might have another republic in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so PRC is like, we got to take back these islands.
Okay.
We need this capitalist trade. So in 1958, the PRC began shelling Jinmen Island, which is one of those ones that's right off the coast.
Okay.
The Nationalists asked for U.S. military support. We said no. However, the United States did agree to guard Taiwan, freeing up the Republic of China forces to go defend the islands.
Okay.
So they're basically like, well, we'll make sure nobody lands here. So then he could send everything to defend the islands. However, eventually the United States had a full 5 aircraft carriers and escorts around Taiwan.
Okay, that's considerable force.
That is a lot, right?
Okay.
That is a large number of ships. Also, the United States secretly provided the Republic of China with advanced experimental weapons, such as the Sidewinder heat-seeking missile, which was the first missile of that type. Mounted on Republic of China jets, they were the first effective use of guided air-to-air missiles, anywhere that I'm aware of. So the first missile kill in history was from a Taiwanese pilot, or a Republic of China Air Force pilot. Because basically one of the things over these islands while they were shooting with artillery is that both sides would send planes to do stuff, right? So they'd have plane battles over it. And the missiles basically made it so the Republic of China had air superiority.
Yeah.
However, this plan backfired when a missile lodged itself inside of a Chinese plane without exploding, and then was brought back to the base to be reverse engineered. and the whole future generation of Russian, Soviet anti-air missiles were based off of this one missile that's stuck in the side of a plane and didn't explode.
Yeah. Well, that's
right.
That's a pretty good. That's a lot of help.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So there were limits to U.S. support, though. Mm-hmm. Chiang Kai Shek wanted to bomb the mainland, and the U.S. was like, "No,
that's too crazy."
You're not bombing the mainland. But the People's Republic of China also seemed unwilling to escalate the conflict. PLA artillery firing across the strait was told not to shoot at U.S. vessels, even if they were like dropping off supplies. They even offered to temporarily give up their claims on Taiwan. Basically, they're like, we won't try to attack it anymore. We'll do a ceasefire. You can evacuate these islands. They
didn't want to start World War III either.
They didn't, right? And they also, at this point, they just wanted the blockade to stop, and they wanted the people off those islands.
Yeah. Also, I feel like unless Soviet Union helps,
yes,
the CCP at this point, right? China at this point, China at this point is very lonely sort of existence.
Yeah, and the United States obviously would be perfectly capable of instituting a complete blockade on China, right? Which would obviously be a huge issue. But eventually diplomacy of a sort prevailed. The PRC was already imploding due to the Great Leap Forward, and Soviet-Chinese tensions were at an all-time high. The U.S. pressured the Nationalists to end the blockade and to semi-demilitarize the islands. So to kind of remove troops from them.
That's going to kill Chiang Kai Shek.
I know.
Yeah.
However, artillery fire continued between the strait for the next 20 years, but became increasingly ritualized, with barrage dates often announced ahead of time. where they'd be like, okay, we're going to bomb for 2 hours every other day. And then, a couple months they're like, actually, we're going to, we're going to do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And they would let the other side know.
Okay.
So, but, just to keep up appearances.
Yeah.
Over 1 million shells were eventually fired, and it was the longest lasting artillery battle in history.
Wow.
So in the end, the strategic partnership between the USSR and the PRC was costly and damaging for both sides because...
How is it costly for USSR?
Well, because the China... So the USSR, the Soviet Union, was also recovering from a war. And they both needed the same things. They both needed tractors and trains and railways and all these other things. And so every bit of that, and steel and iron, so every bit of that they gave to China,
PRC,
they didn't have for themselves.
Right.
So it was it was rather costly. They had to send all these technical experts, but it was also very costly to the PRC because it increased all this debt. They had the Great Leap Forward to pay back the debt, and it caused all these issues. And in the 1960s, they split. Western trade exploded with China after this period, while Soviet trade with them sharply declined. From this perspective, the U.S. policy could be considered a success because it split them up. A rather prescient, so then the United States thought, okay, we finished this crisis, Chiang Kai Shek's going to chill out. Maybe we can get to some sort of a negotiation here. A rather prescient quote from the British Foreign Secretary stated, they do not want mediation. And their ultimate goal appears to be some sort of direct arrangement with the Nationalists. We are therefore likely to be in for a fairly long period of such tactics. So that's basically the story, right? So 20 years later, so 13 years later, the United States officially recognized
People's Republic of China,
left Taiwan out in the dust. But I do think it's interesting because, as we were kind of talking about, obviously, if you don't really follow Chinese history much, this might be like not that surprising, but it basically, a lot of it goes against the narrative that you typically hear. Like, I didn't think anybody really recognized the PRC until 1971.
I didn't either.
Right? That when the United Kingdom did it within the first year.
Yeah.
And that everybody wanted to trade with them, but basically the Republic of China, Chiang Kai Shek, and the United States basically stopped it, right? Okay. So what do you think now, Cherry?
Oh, I don't know.
Chiang Kai Shek caused a great leap forward,
right?
I'm not sure what to call this episode. I'm thinking I'm wondering if it'd be too clickbaity to call it Chiang Kai Shek's great leap forward, or when Taiwan ruled the seas. Chiang Kai Shek's pirates.
Yeah. Now I wonder because so like I have heard of like Taihai Weiji, which is the translation of a Taiwan Straits crisis. And I know that like the last one we've had, like the most recent one we've had is like in the 90s. So I've heard of that one, and it's called the third. Yeah. Taiwan. And I never considered what was the first and the second, which is what you introduced today. Well, so originally I wanted to do this episode because I wanted to talk. I knew the anecdote about the first use of a heat-sinking missile. Like in that sort of context was when a Republic of China plane shot down a Chinese plane. And I was like, oh, that's interesting because it's like, I mean, who would even know that was a thing, right? That in the 50s, they were having missile duels over the Taiwan Strait. Yeah. Because I think from the U.S. perspective, it's sort of like, well, Chiang Kai Shek left and now he's there. And then things are kind of just continued on until the present day. No, it didn't. Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think, this man in China was quote unquote liberated, right? Chiang Kai Shek and his KMT party went to Taiwan. That was not, I mean, he's not, the white terror sort of reigned on Taiwan. Yeah. As soon as he went there, right? So on both sides of not the aisle, on both sides of the trade, right? It was just the masses, the people were having terrible, terrible lives. Yeah. Right. And, if you're a nation, right, in a zero-sum game, and you can't trade with anyone because on the other end there's this blockade, and then that could give you a reason. That would seem to give you a reason, at least some excuses, some desperation to set certain policies. Yeah, to I don't know, to to give Soviet Union all your food, you know? And
because if you are the People's Republic of China, right? I mean, let's say it's 1954, right? Mm-hmm. But what do you do, right? You know you can't negotiate. You basically can't negotiate with Chiang Kai Shek.
You gotta abandon the daddy. You gotta abandon the Soviet Union.
Well, I mean, because it's like, what do you do? Because it's like, okay, Chiang Kai Shek's not going to negotiate with you.
No.
Because the only solution Chiang Kai Shek is going to accept is he should be in charge of China.
Yeah.
And Mao also is only going to accept that.
Yeah.
So you're kind of at an impasse, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Chiang Kai Shek has half the Japanese Navy because he inherited it, and a bunch of American jets and all these things.
Yes.
So in a way, he's in the driver's seat.
No, because I've always, like, we watch all these old movies of China, right? And at the first 10, 20 years, it's always, everyone will say, we're taking back Taiwan.
Yeah.
Or we're preparing to take back Taiwan, we're training or whatever.
And you're like, why do
they care so much? And it never happened.
Yeah.
A, it never happened.
Yeah.
B, why do they care so much? It's a small, tiny island, right?
Yeah.
Not to, shit on Taiwan or anything.
Yeah.
But why do you care? You have like 80 times of the land, right?
Yeah.
And if you're
probably
Mao,
1,000 times the land.
I know, right? So obviously, it's all symbolism. You got to have all of China. Also, if there's another China somewhere that undermines your legitimacy, even though China had played that hand pretty well in 20, 30 years' time, right? Got into the UN, got Chiang Kai Shek kicked out, got Taiwan kicked out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do think, you know how like maybe around last year, there was this Black Hawk helicopter that got, I think malfunctioned in Taiwan and fell down, and this high-ranked general died.
Yeah.
Right? As a result of the accident.
Yeah. And
the reporting at the time, I remember, in the Chinese world, obviously you go, oh, who did it? Was it really a malfunction and all these conspiracy theories? Yeah. But on the in Taiwan media, I think the government sort of came out and said, because obviously the Taiwan it's a very new democracy, right? And had gone through all these crazy times when Chiang Kai Shek, all he did was trying to take back China and block and contribute troops and money to this blockade, which must have been very costly, I imagine. And the military was sort of the nation, if that makes sense, in a dictatorship. And because his force is sort of a...
and he's not a politician, he's a general.
No, he's a general, He's 100%. Like, he's a warlord.
His wife's a politician, I guess. But
his wife is But
he was never a politician. He was always like a general that got put in charge of a country.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a warlord has a country, right? A warlord has Taiwan, is in charge of it. Yeah. And at that point, your reliance on the military is everything. The military is the government. Yes. Without the military, there is no government. So there was this panic, I think, with sort of the old mindset in Taiwan that, what does this mean? A high-rank general has been just passed away in an accident. That could be a coup. Yeah. And the president had to come out and say, no, the military has been nationalized. Yeah. Right? It's a modern force now. And we have contingency plans. There's many other generals. And all these procedures in place. And having a general passed away, or even during a war, or even this is an accident, does nothing to shake the democratic government that exists. Yeah. And I thought that was interesting because maybe at that time of the chunk, you know what I mean? A high-rank general dying wouldn't mean the end of a country, or at least...
well, do you know what it's like? It's
at least a very shaky situation.
It's like the death of Stalin.
Yeah.
Right? Which is if you haven't seen The Death of Stalin, I kind of wish they would do a Death of Mao movie. But because it's so basically it's like...
You will never be able to get the details.
When you have a guy who runs an entire country with the secret police and he's killed literally everybody else who could possibly replace him. Yeah. Then he dies. Yeah. Well, then it's like...
The country goes with him.
Yeah, like who replaces him? Yeah. Because you've made it so that there is no clear path to replace him. Because the whole point is nobody can kill him, because if they do kill him, the country will go into chaos. Yeah. So I think that's like part of what the Soviet Union had to do in the 50s and 60s. And again, sort of with the Sovietization in like the 90s and 2000s, which didn't really work because Putin got put in charge. But one of the things the Soviet Union had to do was de-Stalinization, which is like you have to kind of like...
I can't believe that's a word. Yeah. That's an actual word. That you hear, you know what it means. It's probably called
something else. I'm sure there's a Russian...
I know, but you hear in English, you know what it means.
Yeah, right? It's like, how do we when you have this system, right? How do we adapt to it when that person's gone? And like Taiwan had to go through that, right? Taiwan had to, or Republic of China had to go through that with like Chiang Kai Shek's gone. So what do we do now? Do we just put a new Chiang Kai Shek in charge and he's also crazy? Or do we like, yeah. And calling him crazy is maybe not. I think he's,
I mean, you have to be kind of crazy.
He's very ambitious.
Yeah, ambitious people are crazy.
Yeah. So,
no, I'm not shitting, but like, I mean, to be a warlord, to be a general, or to be a president, you have to, like, you know, you have to sort of order troops to go die for a cause or ideology or whatever. You sort of have to have that craziness.
So yeah, that's a different perspective of the first 10 years of the People's Republic of China.
Yeah.
Of, it's not just everything was great and Mao screwed it up. It was, there was a lot of problems. And
who do I blame now?
And Mao made it worse.
No. Yeah, I know.
So yeah.
I don't know what to say.
You don't know what to say? Are you shocked?
I totally didn't know about a lot
I
of
didn't know about it
here.
either.
Like, I knew Chiang Kai-shek was crazy.
Yeah.
I knew he tried to take back China. I didn't know what our resistance was.
Yeah.
Maybe if I was, you know, paid more attention in history classes, I would have.
Again, I think
it's not a narrative that would play up.
No, and I think it doesn't. I think they don't.
Also, I grew up in 90s in China, right? And that's when the One China idea came up. And there was a real effort on both sides of the aisle, again, I think, at least temporarily, to say, okay, we'll put all these aside. We'll trade. We'll do whatever, right?
Yeah.
And we'll share culture and we'll work economically together. Which obviously, I think that method in itself also has a lot of problems and a lot of downsides. But at least I grew up in a narrative that these things didn't happen, that we're trying to build a bridge.
Yes.
We're not trying to build a blockade.
But
right? So, even though now it's going back again.
But yeah, no, I think it just doesn't get talked about as much. I mean, I'm sure. So, you know, we're not professional historians or anything. But I'm sure people.
We're going to pretend to be having this podcast.
But I'm sure people, obviously, on in China and Taiwan and United States, wherever, who professionally study or are professionally educated about Asia, will be like, oh yeah, of course that happened, right? But I think it's one of those things that, as a fan of history, it isn't really part of the narrative, and it just seems like it should, because it's very.
Maybe it is in Taiwan. I don't know if you grew up and got educated, because obviously by the look of this, Taiwan's fate was sort of like just in deep shit. For like 30 years under Chiang Kai Shek, right? Yeah. And then not until it got a democratic government that it sort of got it together. Yeah. I mean, obviously they had a huge economic boost and growth before they, I think, got the democracy officially. But I mean, I don't think during these years it wasn't that great of a time to be living there.
No. But
probably better than living in mainland China, but still. Yeah,
let us know what you think. I'm curious if this is more well known and we're just ignorant. Let us know. I'm curious, but hopefully that was enjoyable for people.
Yeah.
You know, let us know what you think on Twitter, and then if you have things that you want us to talk about. I think our next episode is going to be a little bit lighter than talking about blockades of the mainland.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, find us on Twitter. Find us on Instagram. You can email us at
we're so lonely.
I know.
We're so lonely. Please talk to us.
You can email us or you can talk to us on our website, with ChineseCharacteristics.com.
Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.
See you next time.